Welcome to Kaiser Watch with John Kaiser. I'm your host, Jim Goddard. John, what's coming up on the show today?
Well, Jim, today we're going to talk about whether I am insane or not.
Well, your KRO Favorites have been a disaster for several years in a row. What are you going to do differently in 2025 so that you do not meet Einstein's definition of insanity, namely doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different outcome?
Well, this year's KRO Favorites, of which there are 10 of them, is down, finishing the year down 25%. Last year's was pretty miserable. I've had several talking points for the past few years, which I think are still valid, but my predictions as to what they will result in have not become reality. And these three key topics that I have, I think, are finally reaching a point where they will become serious drivers of interest in the resource juniors. So one of my themes has been the idea of the energy transition, which is that if we are to achieve these goals of net zero emissions, carbon dioxide and methane type greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, we need to adopt certain technologies that are much lower carbon than the current fossil fuel forms of energy, which produce the carbon dioxide that is driving climate change. And the EV sector has been the most obvious linkage to the resource juniors, because you look at what the future requirements for lithium are, for copper and all that, and you say, okay, this is new technology coming on stream. We know what the existing supply is for technologies that already exist. So by 2030, we need 50% more copper supply, and some have suggested 600% more lithium supply, and probably double that if solid-state lithium-ion batteries become reality. So that's been a major theme for the past few years. I've talked about it last year and the year before. Lithium pretty much dominated my discourse. Things went very well for a while, but then we had this slump where the prices crashed. The EV sector, at least in the global West car maker sector, suddenly ground to a halt. And now we have a Trump administration coming online in 2025, which has declared that climate change is bullshit. It's not real. Fossil fuels are what we're going to be producing and running all our energy on. So it looks like the death of the energy transition. But even today in the Financial Times, there was an article saying that China, which in 2020 set its own EV sector goals for 2035, will in 2025 sell more EV vehicles than internal combustion engine vehicles. This is 10 years ahead of schedule. So whatever is happening in the global West, Europe, North America, it's not happening in China. And China's going to continue doing this. It's had a complete vision of what this is all about. It's secured all its supply chains to make its EV vehicles buildable out of all the materials required. And even if Europe and the United States erect major tariff obstacles for importing Chinese electric vehicles, there is still the global South out there. So whether or not the global West car makers end up delivering EVs, for the moment, it doesn't matter. China is going to continue doing so. All those car makers that set up shop in China, hoping to sell their combustion engine cars to the Chinese, they're basically screwed, because the Chinese are going to be buying Chinese-made electric vehicles. Beijing's going to endorse it. It does not like its import vulnerability with regard to oil, which the United States could, if it wanted to, easily disrupt and paralyze China's transportation sector. China still relies to a large degree on coal-fired electricity, but it's doing this for strategic reasons, and it's happening. And my own view is that the energy transition, last week we talked about the Patriot battery metals getting this 9.9%, $69 million investment from Volkswagen to supply its plant in St. Thomas, Ontario, with spodumene concentrate. This probably won't be in production until 2028-30. So that's a sign that even some of the car makers that are, for the moment, lamenting that the market doesn't want their EVs, they're still looking at a future beyond the climate change skeptics hiatus that we're going to endure for a while, and they're moving to participate in it. And of course, Volkswagen's got this deal with QuantumScape to see if a solid-state lithium battery can be developed. Toyota's working on it. Honda and Nissan are now talking a merger. They've been talking about developing a joint solid-state battery. So I think the global West will end up catching up. So I think this, although nobody seems to think that energy transition metals are going to matter for the next 4 years, I think that will change. And even the Trump administration, when it completely thinks about how, Musk's Tesla brand is toxic to the liberals that bought all the cars before, and toxic to all the MAGA crowd who think climate change is bullshit, there's going to be something worked out where some face-saving way will be found to embrace energy transition goals going forward. But I think the other talking point that I think is really going to become intense this year is the geopolitical conflict between global West and global East. And global East is represented by China and Russia. And what most people do not understand is how much China and Russia combined supply of the key metals and minerals used by the world to fuel their economies. And I've had the graphics available for several years, and it's fallen on deaf ears. I ask almost anybody; they have no clue where stuff comes from. And the Trump administration, the USGS has put this stuff all together. It's there for them to see. At some point, they will discover that when they push their America First policies and really push back on China and Russia, they will end up discovering this security of supply vulnerability. And I expect that next year we could see China, when it realizes it's all hopeless in this tariff war, they might just get on with annexing Taiwan. And Russia and China may encourage Kim Jong-un to annex South Korea. And of course, the Americans would never let that happen. But what could they do other than nuke Beijing, unleash Armageddon? And if that's what the choice is, that means, well, it doesn't matter what I'm doing differently this year. It's all going to be a disaster, and it's going to be the end times. So America will end up doing nothing. Now, that will exacerbate two problems. One is that, yes, where does the global West get its metals from? Yes, places that are either China or Russia, or the global South that's increasingly affiliating itself with the global East. So that's going to create a panic of where this stuff is going to come from. And at the same time, when the America First policies start to really be enacted, there's going to be an exodus from the U.S. dollar, from U.S. Treasury bonds and also the stocks. And where's that money going to go from? Well, all these global South and other global West nations and global East nations, they're not so excited about their own currencies. So one of the best places to go for to bridge the transition will be physical gold. And this year, it's like a major disappointment because gold made it to $2,600, $2,700, all-time highs, and the market just shrugged as far as the producers were concerned. Yes, they did go up a bit, but nothing like they should have based on the scale of the increase, real increase in the price of gold. And the juniors, it's like nobody cares. It doesn't matter. So I think I don't know what price of gold and combination of background events is needed to make the market suddenly start looking at the juniors. I think the rest of the world's going to be looking at physical gold. They, of course, don't really care about resource juniors listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange, but residents of Europe, Canada, and the United States may care about that. So I see the conditions emerging where suddenly there is a need to find domestic sources. Now, there's two approaches for suddenly not having key metals available. One is innovation. You come up, you use material science, throw in some AI, and you come up with entirely new materials and processes that utilize readily available, abundant elements that you don't need to go to Congo or somewhere else like that to get. And there's going to be a lot of capital going into that. But for traditional metals like nickel, copper, rare earths, and so on, you're going to have to explore for these deposits. And who's going to do that? Well, the majors, they're bogged down by their bureaucracies, by their non-entrepreneurial personnel infrastructure. They can't do that on scale because this requires a massive statistical approach where many brains come up with ideas, do data gathering, develop targets, raise capital, test these targets, and statistically out of this emerges the new discoveries that can be quickly developed. And the one thing that's still missing from the whole equation in terms of all the promises that the incoming Trump administration has made, we're still not hearing that for exploration, the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management, the USFS and the BLM will be told to stop blocking exploration permits for the sake of blocking them to keep America this exceptional, pristine park where no mining is done and we just get our stuff from all these shitholes elsewhere in the world. Well, those shitholes elsewhere in the world are not going to be sending their metal to America. America doesn't have to make itself a shithole. It can do this responsibly. The rules are in place. It just needs to be done quickly. And exploration is relatively low impact because there are so few mines being permitted. The environmental agencies there have gone berserk trying to put all their effort into blocking exploration, period, which of course feeds that there's no new deposits discovered that need proper permitting to be done. This has to stop. Once we start hearing that this is over, you're going to do it responsibly, but you're going to do it really quickly, and it's no longer going to be just a policy of stopping, delay, and deny type of thing, then that'll be a signal for, at least in the United States, that exploration game is on. And then the capital will start going into these juniors, and these resource juniors will go from these sort of has-been type of entities that are uninteresting, that always fail, that have no audiences. They will become the salvation warriors that allow the global West nations to establish domestic self-sufficiency in raw material supply, which from decades of just letting it, protecting their own backyards, they've let the global East and the global South dominate supply and create this vulnerability that's now looming and is going to become intense next year and definitely by 2026.
You didn't really answer my question. It still sounds like you're still doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome based on developments you do not control, which means you qualify as insane. What are you doing differently?
Well, okay, all right. You have a point there. I'm reiterating the reasons why I think this broken clock called John Kaiser is going to be right in 2025. Now, at the end of 2023, after just a horrible year, I got lots of nasty messages from subscribers. I'm useless. I'm done with you. You don't know what you're doing. And others were more polite and said, this sector is done. You're trying your hardest, but you can spin your wheels if your hamster wheel isn't engaged with something that's actually produces little bits of food into our trough. It doesn't matter that you're working so hard doing a better job than you have ever done. So I set the stage. I said, okay, so for the 2024, there's going to be the KRO individual membership at $450. Renew in December. It'll be good until the end of 2025, and then end of 2024. Then if I decide that I'm going to continue in this sector, you'll be grandfathered, but I'm going to introduce a higher priced fee to go after a different type of audience, which in my mind, with my research platform, which covers all the Canadian listed companies and the Australian listed companies, it's a do-it-yourself research platform for family offices, for hedge funds, and even for companies doing peer research to figure out what are the competition doing, what's working, how do I package my story, and how do I market it. So it was going almost to a sophisticated level, and of course, this year has been an absolute disaster. Nothing has worked out. There's been no major discoveries, at least none. There's been progress made. Like Canalaska is up. Solitario was up for a while. We've seen gold go up. A lot of things, but nothing has moved on a scale that moves the needle and makes people say, "Wow, Kaiser's a genius. We need to subscribe to this stuff." And but when I saw the incoming Trump administration and saw how they were going to shake things up, some negatively, some positively, I said, I have to give this another year. So I've now decided that, yes, the 450 KRO individual membership will exist for 2025. It'll be available until March 31st. If you subscribe on March 31st, it's only good for 9 months, but you'll be grandfathered to renew at the end of 2025 for 2026, by which time there should hopefully be a raging bull market in the junior resource sector. So I have this deal going on. The $200 a month thing exists now. It'll be the only option available after March 31st. But that was kind of what I had in mind last year anyways. The thing that I'm doing differently now is I'm changing Kaiser Watch. There's still going to be the weekly or bi-weekly Kaiser Watch audio episode where I talk about the companies, the favorites. But I'm also going to start talking more, in the sense that I've already done, about the bottom fish collection, because the focus of the KRO individual membership is the 2025 bottom fish collection, of which there are about 80 now, maybe a few dozen in the wings that might end up being fed into it. These are the companies that I think have the technical teams and the underlying stories that if we go from a 90% glass empty market to one that starts with at least half full to maybe even 90% full, when the tsunami of money starts flooding into these resource juniors who are now perceived as the salvation for this import supply vulnerability, we will see that market be much more sophisticated. Like there's 1,500 of these juniors, but only about 20% of them have the technical talent to actually use money and do something with it. So I am, in a way, a funnel for that money. And in our workshop, we'll have already pre-identified all these juniors that qualify. We'll be monitoring them. It's like an incubator. We talk about it. People do research. I don't have 100 eyes and ears, but we have couple hundred eyes and ears watching stuff, people posting it, mentioning stuff. So we'll be watching these things, accumulating them when they start to, the missing pieces start to fall into place. And sometimes I will end up talking about them in my Kaiser Watch episode, and sometimes they'll be promoted formally to the Kaiser Watch Favorites index. But the big thing that some people will not be happy with is that the written KRO comment and the graphics that I do in conjunction with each audio episode, it's now going to be behind the paywall for the $450 a year KRO individual members and the $200 a month KRO Pro members. However, the really new thing I'm doing differently, I've realized that my older generation audiences, even this year when I indicated that I would continue, what was the response? Well, the response was a rush of submitting notices to discontinue the auto renewal that they had tagged at the end of last year when they still had some semblance of optimism. And this year, it's coming to a whimpering end of capitulation selling. Everybody seems to be walking away in the 11th hour from a sector that really is the only solution for these problems that are going to emerge in the next year or two. And I was of the view these problems were going to emerge whether or not it was Trump or Kamala Harris that was president. This was going to be a problem. It's just going to be a little faster, I think, with a Trump administration. So the new thing I'm doing is launching a Kaiser Watch Substack. My more generic discussions about, say, antimony supply, where it comes from, and all that sort of stuff, that will be free content on the Substack. But there will be a cheap $10 a month auto renewal subscription, and this will be aimed to some of that audience out there, former audience that gave up on the sector, and or both of us, me, myself, and the sector, to be able to come back at a fairly low cost and just start watching to see what's happening. But it's also primarily aimed at younger generations who have no gateway for getting into this sector. And there'll be components in there. I'll do some video presentations where I explain how stuff works. I'll post it on YouTube and then link to it and talk about it in the Substack comments, and that'll be the free portion. And hopefully, as they start to understand that the more specific comments that are about the story paths, the milestones behind these June years, what's going to allow a 3.5-cent stock to go to 35 cents and then to $3.50, that's going to cost $10 a month to see. And obviously, we're going to be incubating this first inside the KRO membership, where these things, they're all broken, they're all flatlining, there's all missing pieces, but we're going to watch how these subtle missing pieces fall into place. And this market's not going to explode overnight. This will be a market that starts to grow slowly, and it is these types of talented resource juniors that are in the 2025 bottom fish collection. These are the ones where you want your eyeballs on. The KRO individual membership crowd will be watching these, will be buying them, and as they start getting their act together, I will introduce them to the Substack audience as, hey, here's stories that are happening. I won't just wait until they've gone up 10 times and then they can buy it after we've all made our money. No, some of them I'll start to introduce either as examples, here's how this worked, or as they're starting to emerge, so that even though they're up, 2-3 times already, but they're just beginning a 10 to 20 times increase, people can see how it works, how the thinking goes. And at some point, it'll all become stupid easy. Every piece of shit will go up just by some influencer pumping it and all that. And that's probably when I will completely shut it down and walk away and just retire. But what are the odds of that happening in the next few years? I'm rolling up my sleeves. I'm here for another year and what will probably be several years in what could be one of the most tumultuous historical periods since the end of World War II.
John, thank you very much for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
We've been talking with John Kaiser. I'm Jim Goddard. Comments made on Kaiser Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as a recommendation to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at kaiserresearch.com.